6 years ago, I was fired from a job, and that was the last time when I was employed. And also 10 years ago, it's been now 10 years and 3 months that I started my very first business. So I thought it would be a good moment to reflect on this a little bit and to see what I would advise my much younger self as I was starting out on my entrepreneurial journey. And also to give those of you who are early on in your journey maybe some advice. You take from it what you want. This is de facto what I'm saying to my 10-year younger self as I was starting out. So take from it whatever you want, whatever you feel like could be applicable to you. So quick backstory. 10 years ago, roughly 10 and a half years ago, I was working at Google. I was in a very good position there. I'd recently been promoted and I was enjoying what I was doing, but there was a little bit of a moment of, well, is this everything that there is? And I felt a little bit of sort of a certain level of tedium that I didn't think was good for me, in that there was this famous essay written by, I think it was by Peter Thiel, or inspired by Peter Thiel, where he said the people at Google, and he actually singled out people at Google, they're not actually really working more than anywhere from 1 to 2 hours a day or something like that. And the rest is sort of like bumbling around and having snacks and having, lunches and so on. I don't think I was working only 1 to 2 hours a day, but it definitely felt like all this comfort, all this material comfort that Google provides you. And indeed, the free food is spectacular at Google. All of that was sort of slowing me down, making me weak, making me too comfortable. And I really felt the urge of wanting to start something on my own, starting my own business. And so in June 2012, I handed in my resignation. At that time, that was really interesting. Also, I was having a job offer from Uber that was in its very early days. And at the time, they were not doing these cheaper versions of taxis. They were effectively still doing just pure limo service. And I had a really insane offer from them that now I would be already a deca millionaire if I had taken it. But of course, you never know how things turn out. But that was sort of my option then, whether to join Uber or to start my own business. And I decided to start my own business, which from a learning point of view probably was the better option, but from a financial point of view definitely was not. And so I just started my own food delivery business. It was called Dinner, DINNR, and I was delivering recipe ingredients to busy Londoners. And I was thinking, well, there's these other recipe delivery services that offer it as a subscription. But why have a subscription? That is a weird thing. You would not have a subscription for pizza or something like that. So why wouldn't you have it ad hoc? And so together with a friend, we started this business. And after 1.5 years, it crashed because I think combined, we had like maybe $10,000 in sales. So it was just very, very unsuccessful. We raised a little bit of money for it, but we burned through that pretty quickly and it went nowhere. And so 1.5 years later, in January 2014, I folded the business. And then in 2014, early on, I was completely broke, lost a lot of money on that business. And so I decided to sort of refill the coffers by joining startups in London. And, it was a hotbed of startups. Of course, it still is. And so I joined a startup that a friend was running. I had met her a couple of years prior and we got along very well. And so she wanted me to be part of the team. And so I joined that, then didn't stay very long there. It was not really a role that was very satisfying. Then I joined another interesting startup. Anyway, I'm not going to bore you. It was effectively what I was doing there. My strategy was that I tried to join different startups, get equity in that position, get into a senior position where I had some equity, and then hope that these startups would be profitable and at some point exit, and that I would get a big cash out from that equity. And so I tried that 3 times. And from that last startup that I joined, which shall remain nameless, I was fired after 2.5 months of being there. It was the first time that I was actually fired for me not being laid off. It's the first time somebody actually on a professional level broke up with me. Nobody had done it before. I was usually the break-upper, never the break-upee. And so in that position, that was such an acrimonious relationship with that company where I just thought, I just don't want to be in a position where I'm depending on a boss. That then made me to start Content 360, which started as effectively a content generation agency. I was a pretty, still am, hopefully a decent, good writer. And so I started writing blog posts and ebooks and such things for other companies. And that then morphed into the coaching program that we have, Alpha Lead Academy, where we help consultants win clients using social media and other organic methods. And that is where we are now. Right now, we're at some 35,000 revenue a month, and we're growing very fast. So we're very, very happy of that. And so now reflecting back on, now that I've made, 3 times the amount of money a month that I did for the entirety of the first business that I made. So I think it was now a good time to reflect a little bit and to sort of give my younger self a little bit of advice of what I should be doing differently. So here are 7 things that I figured that I would have done very, very differently and that were mistakes in retrospect. So first of all, as I left Google, I treated entrepreneurship a little bit like a little frivolous game. I didn't do a huge amount of research on it, and I wrote a postmortem that was pretty successful that made it into a Harvard Business School case study. So that I'm going to link to it below this video. But there I reflected on one fundamental problem, and that was that I started the business simply without, it was effectively a solution that was looking for a problem, right? I had not properly researched the market, and I was also basically just looking for, this sounds like a fun thing to do, but instead of researching whether there is a real problem in the market, whether people really need this. And so I was, for 1.5 years, I was constantly chasing a problem that just was not there, and that my particular type of product simply was not addressing. And that was one of the most fundamental mistakes. And it came from, and that it has a more fundamental mistakes at the bottom, which was I just treated it as a bit of a game. Right? And that was sort of a little bit of the atmosphere in London back then. I don't know how it is now. I left London 3 years ago. The atmosphere was like, oh my God, it's so cool. Let's play the startup game. Right? And especially because there was always other people's money. It was relatively easy to get funds. Even I, with a fairly half-baked business plan, was able to raise some seed funding of, I think it was like £60,000 at the time. And so it didn't feel like that you have like a burden of responsibility of making it work. It was not like now that I have a family and this business needs to work, obviously, our lives depend on it. That kind of heaviness of responsibility, that was missing. And I think that was a big mistake, that I simply was in this type of mindset where I felt like there's no need for me to treat this seriously. And so I treated it like a game. I did shallow research. That was the thing. I believed what people told me. I believed that they said, oh yeah, that sounds like a great service to have. I would totally buy it. And I didn't really dig into it, whether there really was a problem, whether they actually would buy it. I should have at that point just asked them, if you're going to buy it, well, then give me £20 now. I'm going to deliver you a pack if it's a good idea. Maybe some would have bought, but it's at this moment when people tell you that's a great idea, that's where you have to be very cautious. It's a seduction. It's a seduction of something that, especially because my product had a bit of an aspirational halo to it, where I was effectively teaching people how to cook, giving them recipes, giving them easy ingredients. And all of that felt like, oh yeah, I should do this. This is healthy. So I had exactly the same effect that a gym has at the beginning of the year, where many people sign up and then don't do the work. And so that was similar. So it was many problems that all stemmed from the fundamental issue of me treating it a little bit like a cool, frivolous game. That's not to say that I didn't put a lot of work into it, but it was the foundations were simply not there. I hadn't done the hard thinking about it. And I think that is really important when you start a business that is not immediately cash generating, which it wasn't. Treat it really seriously, and proportionally to the time it will take you to make serious money with it. If that takes you long, if you think like, okay, I'm not going to be making anywhere near $10,000 a month with this venture for a year, let's say, all the more you need to make a ton of research and really, really decide whether this is the thing that you will pursue. And now also thinking back, I'm thinking doing a business or starting a business that would not be cash generating anytime soon was a big mistake. Sure, it was in the startup and get other people's money sort of atmosphere back then. That was perfectly legitimate. But the problem with this is I didn't have really a track record. I was a corporate animal. Yes, I had an MBA and I was at Google, so obviously I was not, the dumbest of entrepreneurs out there. But also I did not have a track record of building a business, and I did not have a track record of, for example, raising money. I did not have a network of high net worth individuals, for example, who would give me a couple of million in the beginning. And so that takes me also straight into point two, which is picking a business that is not a cash generator. I really fundamentally believe now that as you're starting out and you don't have much, not much to your name, right? You haven't done anything truly impressive. You don't also have a very unique position in the market. You don't have really special knowledge. You haven't done anything big yet. It doesn't matter. You can still make it big, but it's going to take a little bit longer. And you should not pick a business that will take for a long time to generate cash. And that is both from just from a purely pragmatic standpoint, because you're just going to be slogging away for a long time at something. You're going to be taking tiny amounts of money out of it. It's just going to be a drag. Whereas if now, for example, if I were to build my current business into multiple millions, which it's definitely, I see the roadmap towards it now. And if I build this to whatever, a 2-3 yearly $1 million run rate, imagine how much easier it's going to be for me to raise money for a more product-oriented startup. For example, some kind of B2B SaaS product. If I were to raise money for it, people would see, well, this guy is obviously able to, he's great at selling. He knows how to build a $2 million business. I would already get, besides being able to put in, maybe $500,000 of my own money, I would be able to raise money with it. And so that builds you credibility. So that's why I'm thinking, as you're starting out, if this is your first venture, if you want to start your own business, even if you're still an employee and you're thinking of starting something, start something where you provide a service that you will get paid for immediately. Okay. If you are, and it's pretty much anything, you can do anything that you have a reasonable amount of credibility for. If you have been working in customer service in a large corporation, okay, you know quite a few things about customer service. Provide a service of, you are the customer service manager for other people on a part-time basis, or you teach people how to do great customer service, or you help them build the customer service function. Whatever it is, you have knowledge that other people would pay for on a consulting basis. And if you don't insist that you want to be coaching right from the start, coaching is a level up. I had to go through a phase of done for you work for 3 years before I started coaching. I would not have had credibility starting with coaching right away. So there is another trap that many people fall into. I fortunately didn't, but it's just another thing to watch out for. That as you're starting out, don't go into something that requires a lot of capital. Don't start something that takes you a long time to build a cash reserve or to generate cash. And also don't go straight into coaching because you don't have a lot of credibility. Do done for you work. There could be basically an agency, you could be a marketing agency, you could be a software development agency, you could be a design agency if you have design skills, whatever it is, do stuff done for you. You don't need a lot of experience for that. Initially, you start out with, heavily discounting yourself in order to get client testimonials and referrals. Start small, but build immediately cash generating, not assets, but basically build a cash generating service. That was my mistake number 2. I picked a business that was not a cash generator. It was a lot of investment required. And also what that also means, especially as you are an unproven entrepreneur, you don't have any gravitas with investors, for example, right? You are at their mercy. You have gotten yourself just another boss. Again, if you're like, my motivation is to escape any form of being ordered around by somebody. If that is your goal, and then you get investor money, that's a very bad idea. You just got yourself just another boss and you depend on them completely. Also, it makes you complacent. It makes you think, oh, I have a couple of millions in the bank, we can do whatever we want. It does not keep you on your toes. And that's why I'm so grateful that there were a couple of really difficult moments in my current business, right? When I started out, there was like very little business. I didn't have a clue on how to get clients. And so there were a few moments when I was, pretty broke. And that focuses you, that puts you into action mode. And that's how you learn. The circumstances teach you the fundamentals of business. That is what I would recommend my younger self, is that you just start out, it's just you. Prove yourself without any external help, without seeking investment from others, but prove yourself. You especially these days, you can build $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year agency business, just yourself, without any major skills, without much, you can get to 20,000 a month purely based on organic marketing and sales and getting your name out there and delivering good work, being reliable, providing good quality. You can absolutely do that. And that's what I absolutely should have done in my first few years in business. The third item that is still related to my first business dinner, the third mistake, was picking a business that wasn't a real passion of mine. The startup that I started was about food, and I'm not much of a foodie. I don't really care all that much about food. Sure, when I go to a nice restaurant, it's all nice and I enjoy it, but it's just not something that I would obsess over. It's not something that I read articles about. I would not read reviews of restaurants and something like that. It's not a passion of mine. And I started it purely based on the idea it would be kind of cool to teach people how to cook, because I'm a decent cook. I can cook for myself, and I've cooked up quite a few good meals in my time, but it's not a passion. And the reason why this is a big mistake is that when the going really gets tough, you're not going to stick with it. You're not going to find ways on how to make it work. Right now, what I do is really my life's passion. My sort of ambition is to give people the tools so that they can start a business on their own and don't need to depend on somebody, on a salary, on somebody paying them, and being at the mercy of big corporate if they don't want to. If they enjoy it, it's fine, but I want to give people all the tools that they need to start their own business. And that means that I'm really developing, hopefully, very good skills in terms of sales, marketing, client acquisition, broadly speaking. And I want to help as many people as I can to escape a situation where they are economically unfree. And that is truly because I've experienced this. There's a little bit of a backstory here. I was in an entrepreneur community in London, and I was removed from them. I was kicked out at some point because I did not hold the right opinions. And there were a couple of moments where there was like a messaging board and people were saying things I didn't necessarily agree with, and I contradicted them. And then I was kicked out of that entrepreneur group, because you have to have the right opinions if you want to be a good entrepreneur in the London startup community. And that was quite a shock to me, because I had spent a lot of time building that community. I invested hundreds and hundreds of hours of free time, of unpaid time, developing that entrepreneur community, and it was taken away from me. I sort of, at some point, this sounds a little bit like a victim. I didn't know that it might come, but I just risked it, and I was just fascinated as it was happening, because I just couldn't believe that somebody would be thrown out for such things, of simply not having the correct set of opinions on issues of the day. So, and because of that, because I saw how easily something can be taken away from you, if you depend on a network, if you depend on a job, if you depend on anyone, if you don't know how to take your skills and market them to strangers in a way that strangers will become trusting of you enough that they are willing to invest with you, give you money for services rendered. If you don't know how to do this, you are in a dependent situation. You depend on your employer, you depend on a network that you have. And I just don't like that. I don't like the idea. And I want to help people who are in a similar position to become truly financially free, and to build their own business, and to be in control of their own financial destiny. So it's a little bit of a roundabout way of, I hope this comes across, that I'm really passionate about what I do. And while I'm very wary of the idea of follow your passion and follow your bliss, you always have to find this intersection between what you're really passionate about, what you're interested in, and what is actually monetizable. Okay, and what is likely to make you a lot of money. Because if you're super passionate about butterfly collecting, I'm sorry, there's just no money in it. And so I don't believe at all in the idea of following your passion. And I wrote a very impassioned article against that. I'm also going to link to that in case you're interested. But simply don't follow your passion. Follow where your biggest purpose is. Follow where your biggest contribution is, actually. That is the word. You want to follow your biggest contribution. Where can you make the most meaningful impact on the world? And that also means that you need to get paid a lot. Okay? This is not divided. And I believe that it's my utmost responsibility to become wealthy so that I can provide. It's like the biggest tree provides the biggest shade. And that is my responsibility. And in pursuing this, I believe that I should have picked something that truly is a passion of mine that I'm interested in. And fortunately, I managed to move into that and doing that now. So mistake number 3, I picked a business that wasn't a real passion of mine because I'm not all that into food. Cool. So mistake number 4, and that was halfway through my journey after my business failed. That was January 2014. I decided I have to pack up this entrepreneurship game and I'm going to go back into employment because I'm completely out of money. I was living with a friend at a friend's place in a closet-sized room of his. He was charitably giving me a place to stay. I had to leave my flat. It was way too expensive at the time. So what was the next move? I decided that I'm going to pursue the idea of getting into startups early, relatively early stage, but still sort of already a proven startup. And there I'm going to simply help them grow to a point where that can be a trade sale or an IPO, and I will cash out because I will have had equity. And so I was starting to look for jobs of this sort, and I soon landed one in a startup where I got, it was a senior position, it was a director position, startup of some 80 or 90 people, and I did that for a while. Didn't like that, then I moved into another startup, and another startup, always I got equity. And my goal here in this context was that I wanted the Instagram Hail Mary. I was thinking that at the time there was, I think it was around the time 2013 or 14, it was where Instagram was sold to Facebook. And it was this famous story, everybody was like mind blown that somebody could like start a business and in 16 or 18 months sell it for $1 billion to Google. And everybody who was involved in Instagram, it was, I think, 10 people at the time. Everybody was like multi-deca millionaire because of that, because they cashed out incredibly. So inspired by this, foolish enough, but I was inspired by this, I said, well, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to join startups at an early stage and get equity and then cash out. Well, that was a big mistake. Why? Because you only have so many shots. There's many, many, many startups that might go nowhere, right? How likely are you to pick a startup that will do what you want it to do, be so successful? And even if I'm in a senior position, it's not like I can influence that very much. So how likely is it that I'm going to join a startup that will be so successful? It's a very, very slim chance. Even for already established startups, how much could I also be getting and how many years would I have to spend? Even if it's a moderately successful startup, and let's say I get equity in the amount of 200,000-300,000, it's not a lot of money after all. And I will have spent and invested, how much? 3, 4, 5 years of my life into that. And then it's not the worst strategy, okay? And you absolutely can do that. But if you truly want to be financially free, I would not put all my eggs in one basket. And that is exactly what happened to me, that I was also not really enjoying the work very much. There was a couple of good moments in it, but it was effectively a very stifling environment. You were very limited in what you could do because I'm not the absolute leader of the business. I'm just in the director position, so like second line. And I was just not influential enough that I could influence the direction of the business. So this approach of trying to ride the coattails of a successful business and cash out, it's simply something where you are not in control. And that is the thing that I tried to get away from. That was the thing that I didn't want to have. I didn't want to be beholden to somebody else. And so mistake number 4, I was aiming for the Instagram Hail Mary by joining startups and hoping for the big cash out that then never came. Also, of course, you have to consider maybe this strategy can work if you're so good at your previous jobs and if you have such a stellar track record that you truly can pick and choose from many different options that you had. Maybe I had that option back at Google when I had the job offer from Uber, right? But you never know. And at the time, it was not an attractive business for me to join. But I just had come off a failed startup, right? I just had sunk 150,000 pounds into nothing. So at that point, I was not really a proven player. So it wasn't like I was able to choose from 7 different great positions. I was happy if I get 1 or 2. So that was mistake number 4, aiming for the Instagram Hail Mary. Mistake number 5, not knowing how to prospect or sell, instead relying on my network and repeat business. When I started my own business, I was simply depending on my network. I was still in this mode of thinking, well, I've built up a network of like 8 years in London, and it's going to be easy to get business from that. I did. It was okay. I was making probably some 50, 70,000 a year. It was nothing to write home about, but I wasn't starving. Exactly, as a single guy, even in London, that was decent enough money. Plus, I had some savings. And so I just didn't really bother very much to figure out how I can win new business. The idea of simply being good at your craft is not enough. You cannot just be good at your craft. You have to be equally good at client acquisition when you are a solopreneur. I completely ignored that. It was a big mistake. And the idea of just putting out a little bit of content and thinking that people will come to you, sorry, there's going to be a rude awakening if this is what you think. And again, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just talking to my younger self 6 years ago that I was fired from my last job, what I should have done differently. So the big mistake number 5, I didn't know how to prospect or sell. I was too much relying on my network and expecting repeat business forever. Number 6 was not working on my craft enough. And that goes very much in line with mistake number 7, spending too much time on dating, socializing, and networking. I was a single guy in London in the time of plenty dating apps. And so I was living the life and I was socializing. I was going to parties, although that not much anymore, but I like to spend time with my friends and all of that. And I got sideswiped by many, many distractions. And I believe that now, as I'm looking back, you don't have to be like a complete insane maniac and work 80 hours a week. But as you're starting out, I really would say work only on your business, 0 distractions for 6 days a week, and do that all the time. Yes, it's going to be 60-hour weeks, but do that and you're going to be successful. If you have a cash generating business right from the start, you provide some kind of service to someone where you will get instantly paid, and you that way you build up a cash reserve so that you can then, this gives you the freedom to then decide what are you going to do with that. Maybe then you will say, okay, I don't want to keep being a service provider. Maybe then that gives you some money that you can then put into and invest into another business. You can invest that into build a software product and so on. That's all fine. That's great. But the idea of doing this as you would in a normal job, that's what I was doing. I was effectively behaving like I had another job, and I kept, being distracted. I was seeing friends for coffee, and I was dating and all of that. Nothing of that. I would say to my 6 years younger self, I should absolutely have sort of monk-like focus on purely the business. And yeah, sure, at the time I was 38, so it was about time for me to find somebody to get married. So I think doing a deliberate search for a life partner and dating with that in mind, that would have been okay. I would now say, okay, focus and work 60 hours a week, and you're allowed to do 1-2 dates a month where you are actually looking for a life partner. That's okay. But I was doing way more of the latter and way less of the former. I was simply not working on my craft enough. I was just sort of coasting. Again, on this old preconceived notion that my network and my connections and existing clients will just carry me through. There was no plan. There was no plan to get to a certain amount of money within a certain period of time. I was just floating. So those are my 3 big errors, 5, 6, and 7. Not knowing how to prospect or sell, your sales skills, and especially selling, especially prospecting and selling. You need to get people on the phone who have the problem that you want to solve, and you need to talk to them in a way so that they are willing to pay you money for your services. That is the number 1 most important skill. It's way more important than LinkedIn content. It's way more important than doing videos on YouTube or something like this. Unless you're becoming an influencer, ditch the content initially, and for your first year, only sell. Only prospect, call people, do cold calls, do cold emails, cold messaging on LinkedIn, and get some bloody money in. That is the most important thing. And again, I'm only talking to my younger self. I'm not talking to you. I hope you get some value from this, but I'm sort of, as I'm reviewing the mistakes that I've made in the last couple of years of my business, this would be the 7 most important ones. So the last 3, and before I do a complete recap, the last 3 are not knowing how to prospect or sell, not working on my craft enough. I was just, doing, in standby. I was in standby mode. I was just delivering to people, but I wasn't really obsessing about how can I do a better job for them? How can I, give them even better results? The idea of purely focusing on my clients' results, on making them as successful as I can, that thought didn't cross me. It was like, you pay me, I deliver the service, that's it. Big mistake. Okay, so not working on my craft enough is mistake number 6. Mistake number 7, spending too much time on distractions, effectively. Socializing, networking, so dating and so on, all of that should have been completely reduced. I need to have a consistent 60-hour week where I purely work on the business, not even a single distraction, and the rest can be done, maybe a little bit, tiny bit of socializing and or dating. That would have been fine. So those are my big 7 mistakes. Quick recap: treating entrepreneurship like a frivolous game, not treating it seriously enough, which then spawns many, many strategic mistakes because you are not thinking hard enough about it. Number 2, picking a business that was not a cash generator right from the start. Number 3, picking a business that wasn't a real passion of mine. Number 4, aiming for the Instagram Hail Mary by joining startups, hoping for the big cash out. Number 5, not knowing how to prospect or sell. Number 6, not working on my craft enough. And number 7, spending too much time on distractions. It's not a problem. We all make mistakes, and maybe some of those that I made will help you avoid similar mistakes in the future. So I hope this video was useful, and I wish you all the best.